Hey, how's it going? And if you're like me and you're trying to get the most out of your system, chances are you're thinking about overclocking. And if you're thinking about overclocking, you're probably looking at aftermarket CPU coolers on the internet. I recently picked up a Reeven E12 RGB and a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo on a flash sale for only $20 thanks to the Buildapcsales subreddit. And today, I'm going to see which one is worth your hard-earned money and whether or not it's a worthwhile upgrade over the traditional stock cooler. Now, to keep things consistent, I ran all these coolers, including the Wraith AMD one, with some Arctic Silver 5 thermal paste, as to try to keep all the variables the same between the three. It was also about 81 degrees Fahrenheit in my house, or about 27 degrees C, if you really want to keep track of all the variables. Now, the AMD Wraith's cooler is by no means a bad option. It's miles better than what AMD has offered in the past with their older AM3 CPU coolers, and it's also better than what Intel has to offer at the moment. This is just going to provide a good baseline as to why you might want to spend a little extra to go with one of these, aftermarket tower coolers. Which, jumping right into it, physically we can see they look pretty similar. The Evo's heatsink on the left is a bit bigger in size and weighs a hair more, coming in at a whopping 44 grams heavier than the E12. They both feature four 6mm copper heat pipes that run through the entire cooler, and are both cooled by a 120mm PWM controlled fan. In terms of lighting though, the Evo's fan may be missing a G and a B, but it's rated to move a total of 66 CFM of air at max speed, while the E12's RGB fan can only output 49 CFM, but has significantly more control in the lighting, as it is software controlled RGB and has a ton more options for colors. When it comes to comparing the bases, the E12 features a smoother, flatter base, which in theory should lead to better CPU contact when compared to the Evo. But when it comes time to the installation process, the Evo flat out wins in this department. It's much simpler and easy to install the Evo versus the E12, which requires a bit more steps and a little more finessing than the Evo once you have everything set up and ready to go. Look how easy it is to install the fan on the Evo. It just clips on with little effort thanks to a rather well thought out plastic bracket, versus the E12, which has these really flimsy little metal clips that barely hold on to the fan and can pretty much fly off like a spring if you fail to install them correctly. I was legit more frustrated with these metal clips than I should have been, as multiple times they just flew all over the place and I had to go running and pick them up. Now, the installation process is not the whole story when it comes to a CPU cooler, and realistically on paper, these two coolers look pretty similar. And given that you usually install your CPU cooler every once in a blue moon, how well do these things actually perform once all is said and done? Kicking things off, we have the AMD cooler, which performed about as expected, with idle temperatures hovering around 37 degrees Celsius, and when things got a bit hotter, we saw temperatures reach a max of 64 C while playing a game of Call of Duty, and while the CPU was at 100% usage, it reached a maximum temperature of 81 degrees Celsius. Not bad, given that this thing is pretty quiet while gaming, and definitely a lot better than some of the older stuff that AMD has provided. But when I threw in a mild 3.9 GHz overclock into the mix, the Wraith cooler basically just shat itself. I was able to boot up just fine, but as soon as I put the CPU under any load, the system quickly thermal throttled and shut itself down, basically trying not to turn this thing into a gigantic fire. The Reeven, on the other hand, performed a lot better than the stock cooler, as I would hope a tower cooler would. And at stock settings, we saw a pretty big drop in idle temperatures, looking at around 30 degrees C at stock settings, and about the same when overclocked. When playing a game, temps got as high as 52 degrees C at stock, and while using a 3.9 GHz overclock, it reached a max temperature of 73 degrees C. And comparing this to the AMD cooler, the E12 performed quite a bit better than the Wraith cooler, as when using an overclock, the CPU cooler performed on par with the Wraith cooler using the stock settings, with a max temperature of only 82 degrees C. And definitely not bad given its $20 price point. Now, when it comes down to the Hyper 212 Evo, you can definitely tell Cooler Master has been playing the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Because what it lacks in lighting, it makes up for it in cooling potential. The E12 just didn't perform on par with the Evo, and overall the Evo performed about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius cooler than the E12. With maximum temperatures under load and using a 3.9 GHz overclock, we were only seeing 79 degrees Celsius versus the E12's 82 degrees Celsius. And under gaming, the Evo only managed to hit 69 degrees Celsius at its peak temperature. Nice. Versus the E12 73 degrees Celsius. This is not a large margin, but it's still cooler in a margin nevertheless. Now, to wrap things up, a 4-degree margin between the two really isn't that big of a deal, and practically speaking, these two pretty much perform on par with each other. And if one's on sale versus the other, pretty much just go with the cheaper option, as you're realistically not going to see a performance difference in the real world. Just know that if it is the E12 that's on sale that day, it's just going to be a little bit more frustrating to install versus the Evo. Anyways, that's going to be it for me on this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found any of the information useful, feel free to give it a like. Subscribe if you want to see some more. And hey, hopefully you have a nice day. Take care now. Bye.